Okay, so we just began the questions for the online class. We just began the questions for Revelation chapter 2, and the first one was that the purpose of the letter was to get the believers to repent of their sin, and what would happen next is that they were a promise of a blessing to occur. Number 2, Ephesus. Who had pastored at that church? Paul had pastored there. Timothy, John. So of all the churches and the letters, this is the one that we really have the most scriptural and biblical background on. We know that Paul went there. We know that he warned them that the false teachers were coming. Then he sent Timothy, and then he sent letters to Timothy encouraging him. The false teachers were there, and he sent letters, and he said, here's what you do with false teachers. And so, and then when John came along, he was also in his older years the pastor of that church there. So they had a lot of background in false teaching. What was the dilemma that came from the lacing of the sandal as far as idol worship? First, let's talk about it. What was the lacing of the sandal?
To pretend like you were bowing in front of, so you could eat.
Okay. So the idea is there was idol worship. Not only the gods of Rome were there, but also the temples to the emperors that was there. That had become very popular now in the second half of this century. It was no longer something that you could choose to do or not do, but now you must do it. And so this put the Jewish people and the Christian people in a difficult situation, because what did they believe? Only one God. And so can you go and worship before the idol of Domitian or Nero or Julius Caesar or any of the other emperors? No, of course not. But at this point, it had gotten to a point that if you did not do this, then the repercussions were very dangerous in the community. You could no longer have a license to work. You could no longer provide for your family. You would be ostracized from community things and community events. And so there was a choice that had to be made. Do you worship a foreign god in order to survive? Or do you stand firm on your promise, and the consequences that come, you learn how to handle those? And so the idea became, what if? Aren't we good at those things? What if, hey, I have a thought. What if we do it this way? What if we stand before the altar and we bend and lace our sandal? We're not worshiping. We're not worshiping out loud, but it does appear that way to others. And then the certificate that was necessary showing that you had made the mandatory worship would be given to you, and off you would go. Your conscience would be clear, because your conscience for these people would be clear that you had not worshipped a foreign god, and yet you got away with it. But what is that? Compromise. Exactly. It's compromise. And so the idea that you could do that took hold, but of course, what does it do to your testimony? Anytime you compromise on your faith issues, what does it do to your testimony? What if no one sees you? Okay, God sees you, and not only that, you yourself know what you've done, right? And I'm going to tell you this, somebody almost always sees you. You may not know it, you may not realize it, but somebody almost always sees you. And so compromise is a deadly thing. We're going to spend some more time talking about that later on in our class today. It's something that we deal with in our society on a daily basis. And so it was something that they had to work with also. Number 4, what was the strength of Ephesus? What did they get praised for? Okay. So good works, lots of labor, perseverance, patience, cannot abide what? evil, cannot abide evil or hypocrisy. And so that's a pretty good statement, right? And so you would think if there was a church or a congregation that was fulfilling all of those needs, that maybe that would be enough. Right? That's good. If you look at churches and congregations today, if they're busy and they're working and they're full of patience and they don't allow evil into their congregation and all that, they're fairly well thought of, right? Right. But Jesus actually speaks to them about something else. What was their weakness? They had left their first love. Now, last week I mentioned to you, notice that they didn't say what? They didn't say you have lost your first love, as if you had no choice in it. You know, you simply lost it. It went away. No, it's you have left your first love because you chose to turn away from it. So last week we talked about the fact that this was the second generation in Ephesus. So this church has been now functioning for 40 years since Paul. And so the first generation that had come into Ephesus, what was their congregation like? They knew who? They knew Paul, they knew Timothy, they knew the apostles, they had letters. These are people that had known Jesus Christ. They were able to get all of that intimate information. And so the first love was what? The love of Jesus, right? That comes before anything else. Before you do good works and before you have lots of patience and before you're able to accomplish great things, it's that relationship with Jesus Christ. That's our first love. Some people, we talked about this last week. Some people say, oh, your first love is that giddiness that you have either in a marriage or when you first attain salvation and you just want to go out and tell everyone about it and all of that. Really, it's much deeper than that. It's much deeper than that. Our first love is Jesus Christ and that relationship that we have with him. And then anything that we do for the rest of our life is wonderful works that we're doing in honor of that love that we have for Jesus Christ, right? So if you are doing great things in your congregation, like Ephesus was, but you've lost your first love, what does that mean?
You're worshiping your works instead of your Savior.
Okay. And so what does Paul tell us in his letter that that's like? A noisy, clanging nothing. If I speak with the tongue of angels and have not love, not only love for one another, but that first love that we have for Jesus Christ. It becomes all about creeds, not deeds. It becomes all about religion and not relationship. And is that not something that it's so easy to fall into today? Is we can busy ourselves so much doing the good works that we don't have time for the relationship. And so what have we done when we do that? We've lost our first love. Set the works aside. Set the creed, theology discussions aside. Move all of that to the back burner. And remember that first love, that relationship with Jesus Christ is what's necessary. And so Jesus Christ is telling the people here, you've lost that. And if you don't come back to that, then I'm going to remove your lampstand. Remember that? Hi, Kathy. I'm going to remove your lampstand away from you. We talked about the fact, does that mean there's no longer a church if the lampstand gets moved? But what does it mean? You're working without Jesus Christ in the midst. And how effective is that? How effective is that? Sherry, you had your hand up?
Yeah, something we shared earlier. As I was studying this, God reminded me of Keith Green's song, My Eyes Are Dry, My Faith Is Old. He goes, and then, oh Lord, you're beautiful. And that same heart dry in it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And so we do what we need to do to keep that relationship vibrant and fulfilled, right? Fresh. Good. I like that term. That's right. And so when you feel a dryness, sometimes you can feel a dryness when you're so busy working, right? Can you not? Those of you who have been in ministries or been active in church works and all of that, sometimes when you're your busiest is when you feel your driest, because you're so busy doing all of the things that you forget about that love. What do you do to keep that love fresh? And any time that you begin to drift away from that, the Lord will do something. He'll do something to remind you, come back to me, because I'm what you're seeking. The rest of it will come, but I'm what you're seeking. And so Ephesus needed to come back to their first love. We talked about, I think we answered this question, is that something that can happen in the church today? Obviously, we see that over and over again. The second letter that we discussed last week was the letter to Smyrna. Smyrna meaning myrrh or sadness, something of a fragrance that was used to bury people when they died. This congregation had suffered a great deal of persecution at that time. And it talked about how they were very poor. Now, why would they be poor?
They wouldn't worship Caesar, so
Okay.
they didn't get their ticket.
Okay, they didn't get the approval to go out and earn money. It reminds me of a story when I was in Israel one time. We were in Nazareth. Nazareth is very primarily Arab people that live there. Very few Jews live there. And we were sitting around a big place where they swim. And there was a family, two families there. It was a man, a woman, and several children. And I got to talking with the two men while the women were taking care of their children out there. And they said, you're American. What are you doing here? They never can figure out why we come to Israel if we're from America. And so we were talking about all of that. And through the discussion, I came to find out that they're Christian. Now, they're Catholic because that's the primary, when you say Christianity in the land of Israel, that's what it is. It's Catholicism. The evangelical community in Israel is very, very small. And they're just beginning to find out what evangelicals are in the last 10 years, in the last decade, or maybe a little bit more. Primarily, though, when you say Christian, it's Catholic. And so they're Catholic. And so we began to talk about that. And he said, it's very, very hard to be an Arab living in a Muslim community and be Christian. And he said, I lay tile. And he said, I can't find work. It's so difficult to go and find work anywhere. And he said, they won't hire me because they know that I'm Catholic. And his children at school face a lot of persecution because they're Catholic, not Muslim. So they're called infidels, and they're ostracized from the community. And so as we began to talk about all of that, I asked both of the men, I said, when I go back to America and I talk to people, what do you want me to tell them that you need? And really in the back of my mind, I thought he was going to say, send money. I thought, because that's really what they needed at the moment was, and he said, tell them to pray for the Christian church here in the Arab community. He said, tell them to pray for their brothers and sisters in the Arab community that are trying to spread the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I thought, oh my goodness, we forget. We forget that we live in the world that we live in today, that's still going on there. All right, so they suffered a great deal of persecution. So how could a poor person be rich or a rich person be poor?
Rich in their faith would make a poor person rich.
Okay, rich in their faith. Good, good. Any more? Anything else to add to that? So if you're those two gentlemen that I just told you about, are they rich in their faith? Are they rich in today's material world? So if you're living in that, and you're having a hard time feeding your family, and you're having a hard time surviving, what is the encouragement that he is saying here when he says that you are poor, but you are rich, he says? What's the encouragement that we give people who are living that? It's easy to go to a poor person who's hungry or can't feed their children and say, you're rich in your faith. You're rich in your faith. But what is the encouragement that he's giving them here?
Storing your treasures in heaven.
Okay, storing your treasures in heaven, right? And this time that we have on earth is what? How long ago were you 25? Like in the blink. I mean, seriously though, doesn't it just seem like just a few years ago our children were home and little? And it goes by so quickly. And so then we reach the end of that. And so who is the rich one? The one that has the big 401k? Or the one who has throughout their lifetime stored treasures up in heaven for an eternity with God? And so that was the encouragement he was giving them. Because if you're living in persecution, your life could be over tomorrow. Your life could be over for these people tomorrow. And he's saying it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You will get through this. It will come, but you will get through this. What's important is that you know that for everything you lack here, it will be provided for you and more when you're with me. And it will be provided for you throughout eternity. So hold on. Have faith. Don't falter. It's just a little while. And that's for us too, because although we're not living in that kind of persecution, come on, we all have issues that we're dealing with. Sometimes they can really drag you down, depending on what they are. But if we can remember the lesson for those that were persecuted, it's only for what? Just a little short season. And so I will carry you through that short season. And yes, it will be difficult. There isn't any way to get past that. But you will get through it. And when you get through it, what you have accumulated in riches is forever. We just got to keep reminding ourselves and walking alongside those that are suffering and reminding those that are going through it. Giving that encouragement as we go through it. All right, the rest of the ones that we have there are for the ones